Okay, moving on, we have the development of the New England colonies. They start to develop, and when we take a look at New England today, we see multiple places. We see Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire. Right, these are what we look at. You also have Maine and Vermont. We'll deal with them in future units. So we start off with these, and I go back to what I stated earlier with some of my other statements from the earlier recordings. The people in Massachusetts went there for religious freedom, but their religion. While there, they were going to establish their rules, and that's how they wanted to have it, both in Massachusetts Bay and in Plymouth. And so the idea of being tolerant towards other religions was not seen in Massachusetts. And so New England is really going to develop off of this. Right? Many of the Puritan leaders were so intolerant that they would banish people who disagreed with the church philosophies. One of those cases would be Rhode Island. A guy by the name of Roger Williams in 1631 disagreed with the church, and so he was banned. He went to and established the place called Providence. Also, nearby, a woman by the name of Anne Hutchinson in 1638. She would also be banished, and she would found Portsmouth. This would make up Rhode Island. In 1644, Williams would be granted a charter from Parliament that really combined both the Providence and the Portsmouth colonies, establishments, and it created a colony that was really known for religious toleration throughout its existence. And so this is an example of how the Puritans, being intolerant, even though they went for religious freedom, on the other side, they weren't going to accept people opposing their religious beliefs, led to the foundations of Rhode Island. Another New England would be Connecticut. Right? Another New England colony that would get set up would be Connecticut. Now, Connecticut would first start, we first see Reverend Thomas Hooker establish Connecticut, and he would establish the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which was representative government in Hartford. Right? In Hartford is where we're looking at. Now, when we look at it, pardon me for looking at my notes again, it was a similar idea. They wanted to have more openness. They were unhappy with the authority that was going on in Massachusetts, so they went and established Hartford. Another person would establish another place in what we now know as Connecticut. John Davenport would establish New Haven. They would combine, and what we really see is this democratic constitution, really one of the first ones in the New World. And so we get this limited self-government. When Connecticut gets its charter, they have a limited self-government. They have an election of government. So that was something that was really pretty new. Yes, you had the House of Burgesses down in Virginia, but here you have, which is a representative government, but here you have pretty much a constitution with the fundamental orders outlining this representative government. So they have a limited government. New Hampshire would also get established. Now, New Hampshire wasn't dealing with trying to get away from Massachusetts authority or anything like that. We have King Charles II come in, and he wanted to reestablish some control. And one of the ways he did this was he took away what we now know as New Hampshire. He took it away from Massachusetts, and he wanted to have more royal control. Now, what we start to see happen is these early New Englanders, these early Puritans, we start to see the dissident take place, this religious intoleration. We start to see it wane as we get into the 1660s. Your generation removed from your second generation now, and they start to want to allow partial membership. We see this in New Hampshire, especially. You have the Halfway Covenant take place, which would allow partial members to start to have a say. So we start to see a loosening up here of the religious controls, because you were getting more and more dissidents as you get a generation removed. And so those are some of the things that we have. Now, so we get New England developing here. One of the things that's going to happen that is something of note, even though it wasn't major and it didn't last very long, you would start to see an alliance take place. 1643 to 1684, you'd get a confederation of these New England colonies, which means they worked in alliance against each other. This was a self-defense alliance against possible Native American resistance. And so they did this. Why is that important? Well, it shows some unity. It shows some unity amongst the colonies, and when we see a century later, that's going to be a big deal when you get to the Revolution. And so it's really the first time we see this alliance between colonies, this intercolony connections that we start to see. Now, they would see it in King Philip's War in 1675. There would be the chief Metacom would lead a revolt against the colonies there in New England. King Philip would get defeated, and that would pretty much end the Indian resistance in New England. So it did see some reaction to it was effective for them to unite in that purpose.